Yesterday was just so awful, but TB, show me what I'm gonna review today. Something to just make me forget about what happened yesterday and all the political stuff. Wait, the Powerpuff Girls reboot? But I already made a video on this. I already made a promise that I'm not gonna do another one. Oh, there's an anime version of this. To be totally honest, I completely forgot about this. Hello there everyone, this is the Animewolfgamer and today I'll be reviewing the Powerpuff Girls anime. Now I shouldn't be acting all surprised since I have heard about this show for a long time. This anime wasn't well received by fans, which I could see why, but however, after all the episodes, I can safely say that this is much better than the Powerpuff Girls reboot. However, this anime suffers a whole new problem altogether, which I'll go over as we go along. Let's get this review started. Our story basically follows Professor Utonium and his son, yes, he has a son, as they try to understand the new chemical made called Chemical Z. The things turn sour when the weather is out of control, but thanks to Chemical Z, it managed to become back to normal, only the Z-rays begin to appear and affect anyone who touches it. This is where the Powerpuff Girls form, as Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercups are now blessed with superpowers. Together they will stop the forces of evil and prevent him from destroying New Townsville! Okay, so right off the bat, the story is completely different, which I'll give it credit for since it doesn't rehash like the reboot did. The stories are basically episodic adventures of these three girls trying to live their life and stopping crime one day at a time. I feel that the main strength this show has is when they can tell single stories that can go pretty ridiculous on how they handle threats. But when the main story comes around, things go to a downfall. First off, it's hardly there. Like, really, it's hardly there. The big story arc that they mentioned before only comes at the end of the series. Yeah, there are subplots throughout the anime, but even they have problems with how far apart some of these are. Like Bubbles' friend, who doesn't appear until the last third of the show. It makes it very distracting that there are no focus on these plots despite the fact having entire dedicated episodes building up to what their climax will be. It's a big issue when the episodes remind me there's a big threat out there, and yet at times he's barely there, and at the times that he was there, could be just a gag. Speaking of gags, the humor is pretty weak. Now, in the English dub, it's a bit different, but I have seen both, and honestly, I prefer the English version, but not much. The Japanese was just meh, with some serious moments really dampening the experience with some exceptions. The dub is full of puns and it gets grating after a while.
Fear not, my master, as I will carry forth your teachings. I too believe in the way of the noodle!
So that's what happens if you add too much vinegar.
But I think the biggest downfall is how it doesn't have any pop culture references and jokes that the original have. Now tell me this, what is the Powerpuff Girls well known for? Oh well, it's down-to-earth humor and references that fits within the plots of the show. Here we get puns and some of them are just not really funny or clever, and the wacky off-the-balls humor that Japan usually puts out doesn't really help. And it's not like I don't have a problem with this since, you know, it's supposed to be a different version of the Powerpuff Girls, but they rely on this way too much on both Japanese and English tracks. Like, at this point, I don't think they weren't even trying to make some clever humor and all that. They sometimes do hit, but most of the time, they just completely miss the bullseye. You can see why this story is a bit of a clusterfuck. Now, don't get me wrong, I like it when the show does single one-shot stories that they do. I feel that you'll at least find some really good episodes here and there, but even then, some of the plots aren't too interesting, like when they focus on Mojo Jojo, which I'll get to in a bit. Really, in all seriousness, the show has a huge strength and weakness. The single one-shot stories are pretty decent for the most part, albeit with some stinkers. But the ongoing plot they have is pretty forgettable, and that goes to the same with some of these subplots. But in the end, I didn't like them as much as I would try. But hey, it didn't reach to the god-awful level, so that counts.
Received the news from England just a moment ago!
It's your sister, can you believe it? She's finally coming home for a visit!
That's why they're acting weird. Duchess is coming back!
If there's one thing I do praise a lot in this anime, it will be the art style of the show. Oh my god, is the art style so beautiful to look at! It really does feel like it belongs in the world of Powerpuff Girls. Almost every single character design fits within the characters of the cartoon, and the colors are a match made in heaven. It's just eye candy, and honestly I feel like I am being teased with some sweet candy thrown into my face. Wait, what the? Wait, what? But unfortunately, the animation is where I sing a horrible out-of-place tune. For one, you can tell how cheap the budget is when they allow these long transformation scenes to go on for 2 fucking minutes. Yeah, they reuse this a lot, and it's very inconsistent with how long it lasts. Sometimes it's short, and other times it isn't. This also goes for the movements of these characters. Sometimes they just look stiff, and it's kinda unpleasant to look at. But not as much as the main girls. Okay, now hear me out. I ask you to look at these girls and tell me what do you see. If your answer involves with anything with lollies, then you, sir, will be visited by Chris Hansen. Yeah, I was very put off by these designs as they just seem very wrong to me. Now I know there has to be changes and I understand why they are drawn, but the looks and designs just didn't feel right. I will say they at least got the hairstyles down, I guess. If you're expecting great action for this anime, don't bother. The action is pretty generic and kinda boring. This is something that the original will always have over this. The sad part is that I know this anime could do more than this, and it's done by Toei Animation, which I know they can do better. Overall, while I love the art style, the animation, the girls' designs, and the action kinda steps it down a lot.
You heard anything? Just my pride.
Okay, now there are 2 versions of music for the English and Japanese versions. Let me get this out of the way and say that the English version is the weakest, and that is because they just make some shit music by throwing so much instrumentals there. The English opening is one such example. It wasn't until later that they throw in the original Japanese, but man was it a mess. The Japanese tracks are way better, with my favorite being the first ending song. Probably the only song that reminds me of Powerpuff Girls, to be honest. Also, going back to the English version, they added a lot of cartoon effects. I am not kidding, as I swear I could hear at least like 5 or 10 of them in each episode.
Idea. He knew what he had to do.
I will say that at least it makes some scenes look a little funny, but I feel it's a cheap way to get some laughs. Rather than relying on witty humor, they have to use this just to get me to laugh just a little bit. I'm sorry, but it's just not funny that much. So overall, the music for the Japanese track is good, but the English version is crap and it should go away.
About sportsmanship!
Nah, that stuff's for wimps.
Whoa, is he serious? I can't wait to see his face when Dad beats Panda Face McGrath! What's that?
Okay, this is where I have a hard time recommending this to any fans of the original. Now, the subs, while well acted as usual, I have a big problem when it comes to how serious they take in most situations. Now, with how the anime looks, it's kinda hard to take this very seriously. Especially if it has anything to do with Mojo Jojo. Honestly, I instantly clicked out after episode 30. The The dub, while a lot better as they know that the anime looks gives leeway to these jokes, I feel they also shot themselves in the foot because it gets so fucking cluttered with it. I swear, you hear them trying to be funny in every instant that you just wanted to tell them to shut up! It really ruins any chance of slowing down when the serious moments comes up. Very rarely they will stop joking and start taking it seriously. Well, as seriously as they get, despite the fact that the art style really doesn't help. Or the writing for that matter. When it comes to the voice acting as a whole, I'll say that you'll recognize most of these voices as they pretty much match most of the characters. At least in the English dub, if you're just focusing on that. But I say most because some feel so off. One of the best examples is the Gang Green Gang's leader.
Alright fellas, there's a little pest now, so listen up. Here's what I'm thinking. Ivy, you and Big Billy bring her a drink. Then, when she reaches for it, you go ahead and put her to sleep with your magic trick. And that's gonna make it easy for Big Billy here to carry her off.
He sounds like he's choking on something, like his lungs are about to give out. I think he needs to drop the pack of smokes. Now, he isn't the only one with a voice change, but with the other members, I at least get their voices since even some change gender, but his is really distracting. Oh, and Blossom doesn't really sound like herself at all, to be honest. I'm just a bit turned off with how her voice sounds.
Oh, it's the senior boys basketball team! So cool! And the senior boys soccer team? All that cuteness in one place!
So overall, if you really can't stand the English dub, then go with the subs. But if you can't take them seriously, then I suggest the dub.
I'm so tired. I want my bed. Me too. I'm wiped.
Okay, now this is where most of my problems stems from the entire anime adaptation. First, let's start with the major players here. Blossom. Oh, Blossom. What the hell have they done to you? Now, I know people will say that the reboot is worse because they exaggerated her flaws way too much, but in here, she just changed completely to a boy crazy otaku. I'm sorry, but really? Is that the best you could come up with? This is where most of the comedy and stories comes from, and honestly, it's pretty dang annoying. Now, one could argue that this is better because it's a new look and it doesn't ruin the personality completely. Okay, I can see the point there, but still, my problem is how this is all you're going to remember her by. I feel she is just a completely different character at this point, and it's really distracting. The other two are at least close to their personalities with some changes that are decent enough, I guess. But Bubbles is way too much of a diss in the first two halves of the anime. It isn't until the third half that she shows some smarts, but before then, I feel like she's just a blonde stereotype, and a really bad one at that. Buttercup seems to be the only one who is at least close to her original counterpart. While I do get annoyed at how she keeps reminding us that she hates skirts, I can at least tell it's her. Now, when it comes to the other characters, I say Professor Utonium is pretty okay in this one. He has a son, which I will say that it does show that he's a good father while her mother is away from Earth. Yeah, he isn't lonely in this one, which is interesting. The mayor is still his old self, only he looks a little different, and Miss Bellum is still hiding that face of hers, but now I feel that they just downgraded her. Like, we don't see her take charge or anything, and she ends up being a damsel in distress. I feel this is a huge step down from the original. The villains are what you expect, as they are just like in the original series, only even more stereotyped. Yeah, that is how you see most of these villains. Like, for example, Mojo Jojo is just a pathetic monkey who tries to take over the world only to have it backfired. But most of his plans are pretty fucking stupid, like the one time he kidnapped kindergartners. Okay, how does that help you take over the world there? Honestly, I feel they made him even more stupid than what he was from the original show. It just really upsets me that these characters became a bit more stereotyped, and I wouldn't mind it if it had some good jokes from it, which it doesn't. I mean, seriously, how many times do I have to see Mojo Jojo being a stupid fucking idiot for like, I don't know, 5 fucking episodes? He wasn't like this in the original, as he's at least competent on fighting these girls. It's the same thing I have when they try to make him into a bigger threat when in actuality he's just a fucking joke. At least until the end, but even then that doesn't save it. Now there's also some new villains, and for the most part they only get one-shot episodes. Some are okay, while others are annoying depending on the track that you watch, and trust me, watching the dub track for most of these villains are really fucking annoying.
The way of the noodle is threatened by ketchup and avocados. You must only consume the pure
Ah! Damn it, my ears went deaf again! Thankfully, he only appears once, but unfortunately that goes to the same for most of these villains. They only last like one episode, which doesn't make much of an impression on the characters, which is a shame as most of them I feel they could get better with more appearances. Except for the noodle guy. Fuck him. Perhaps the biggest complaint I have is the main bad guy, him. I feel he's a super downgrade from this version, especially when one episode states him as the Devil Lucifer. They didn't say it as for silent dramatic effect, but I'm pretty sure that both the dubs and subs mentions that. But man, is he just pretty laughable and not in a good way. I know that the original he has his moments where you can laugh at him, but he also shows a scary presence. Maybe if he wasn't introduced so late, I could have enjoyed more if he had more screen time. But even then, being beaten by the code is kinda embarrassing to see. Overall, the characters are a bit of a weaker version of the most that you love, and the new ones don't leave too much of an impression either.
Cold!
I really didn't like this anime, to be honest. I really want to, but there's just too many problems that plague this. I'll give it credit that it at least attempts to capture the original and try something new. But however, in the end, I as a fan of the original really didn't care for it as much as I could. It just ended up being a diet, and while I can still see some enjoyment, in the end it doesn't really click with me. I would only recommend this anime to the hardcore fans of the show, and people who wanted a different version that isn't the reboot if you want your Powerpuffgirls fixed. The final score that I give to this anime is a 1.75 out of 5. Fair. This is the Animewolfgamer, and I hope the next day will be even better. See ya!